I'm here today with Gwendolyn Kiste, the 4-time Bram Stoker Award-winning author of The Rust Maidens, Reluctant Immortals, The Haunting of Velkwood, and Boneset Feathers, among others. Her short fiction and nonfiction have appeared in outlets including LitHub, Nightmare, Tor Nightfire, and Titan Books. She's a Lambda Literary Award winner, and her fiction has also received the This Is Horror Award for Novel of the Year, as well as nominations for the Shirley Jackson, Premios Kelvin, Ignotus, Dragon, and Ohio Book Awards. Welcome, Gwendolyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course. I mean, I think it's safe to say from that bio that you're kind of a big deal. But I know that bio still barely scratched the surface, so can you tell me what I missed?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I always think it's so weird to listen to somebody read your own bio. Like it's always such a strange experience.
It's true. It's true. But I'm hyping you up, right?
It's good. It's good to have other people do that, right? Because I think sometimes it's like weird to do that yourself. So it's nice when other people are there to support each other.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. How did you first get into writing, and why did you pick horror?
You know, I feel like I've always been a storyteller. I think with a lot of writers, we were always telling ourselves like weird little stories as kids, or, you kind of like learned that storytelling was a thing as you learned to read, and then, wanting to do that myself and just creating like little books and writing out short stories and things like that. In terms of horror, I've always loved horror ever since I was a kid. It's always been, Universal Monsters or Hammer horror. And then I got into reading short fiction and like old horror anthologies. So yeah, like I just have kind of always been there with horror. It's always been just in my life.
Do you have a formative horror memory, like the first movie you saw or the first book you read that really just stayed with you?
I think the first movie was probably Aliens, which I do consider horror. I think I was like 3. I was way too little. It was like one of my earliest memories. I was so little. I should not have been watching it. But like, I remember because Newt was there and she wasn't that much older than I was. And it felt like, okay, this is something I can get into. There's even a little kid character. Little did I know, like she's one of the coolest kid characters in like anything. Like most of the time, children characters aren't as good as Newt. Newt is so cool. So that was a good start, I guess, into horror and into movies in general. In terms of, horror fiction, like horror literature, I was aware of Dracula from a very young age, and I was aware of Frankenstein, but I didn't read those till I was older. So I think it was a lot of like old anthologies. So like, Richard Matheson and I think Robert Bloch. And so I kind of came into it that way of not necessarily like even being just one specific author, but just the kind of breadth of everything that horror fiction could be, especially short fiction. And I love short stories. I love horror short stories so much.
Me too. Me too. I mean, I love anything horror. I mean, if it says horror, I will be interested. I will watch it. I will buy it. I will read it. Well, when you're starting a new story, what comes first? Is it the plot, the character, setting, something else?
I feel like it depends on the project. I've definitely had situations where it's like an image. I remember for my first collection, I had a story in there called The Clawfoot Requiem. And the first thing I saw was just like a bathtub full of blood. And I'm like, okay, now I need to build a story around this. And I mean, I still remember where I was when I came up with that idea. I was like, in the passenger seat, my husband was driving to work. I was going to drop him off and then go and write. And I remember where we were when I was like, oh, a bathtub of blood, like clawfoot, bathtub, vintage, very pretty. And then it's filled with blood. So sometimes it's like that. And then other times it's like, a concept of, or, I'm really into something like, my next novel is werewolves. So it was like something like, okay, like I haven't seen a lot of feminist werewolf books. There's not enough of them out there. There's certainly some, but there's not enough. And I really wanted to kind of see like a sapphic werewolf novel. And they always say, write the book you want to read. So sometimes it's kind of a bigger concept, or even like, oh, I haven't done that trope. I would love to kind of do my own spin on that. And then other times it's even a character. Like you said, it can be like, oh, I really want to know what this character is thinking. Let's put them in some ridiculous horror situation and see what happens. So I feel like, can really run the gamut in terms of where they start.
And what about kind of a research process? Is there kind of a process that you've perfected over time that helps you add a lot of color to your stories?
Oh, I mean, I'd like to say yes, absolutely, that it's all divided up. But I feel like I try to let the research develop for whatever the individual project is. Obviously, some stories you're not going to necessarily need to research as much if it's sort of more in your wheelhouse or more in your own background as a writer or things you just researched already on your own for different reasons. But then there are definitely ones that, especially if it's in a different time period or an area that I'm not quite as familiar with, maybe I haven't lived there. When I did my novel, when I wrote my novel, Reluctant Immortals, it's 1967 in California. I've spent some time in California, but not so much that I felt like I could just do it from memory. And obviously I did not live in 1967, so there was a lot of research with that. So with that one in particular, because that's always the one I sort of go to when I think, okay, something I did a really big research project for. A lot of that, I was already interested. I already loved California. I already loved the 1960s. So some of the research was already there. And I think for a lot of us, that's true. The things we end up researching, things we're already fascinated by in some regard. But, it was a lot of just reading essays that were written at that time and looking at a lot of photographs. I got a lot of different books of photographs to really kind of get what it really looked like at that time, which was a lot of fun because I was able to actually really map it out. So I knew exactly what the characters were walking by, even some of the graffiti that was up at the time, like actually knowing, okay, they're going to be able to see this graffiti on this wall in San Francisco. It was a really neat thing to be able to kind of immerse yourself. So I always love being able to have those details to be able to integrate into a story.
Me too. And I love finding out that a little detail really happened. I think that is so much fun. It feels like a little Easter egg.
Yeah, very much so. When I wrote my first novel, The Rust Maidens, it was based in Ohio, which is where I grew up, but it was, the first part was in 1980, which was before I was born. And so I actually integrated in like the baseball scores. So it was like of what was happening that summer. So it was like whether the local team lost or won was actually like built into the story. So it was like, even though these fantastical things weren't really happening, I liked the idea of still rooting it as in maybe this did happen, or this is like adjacent to our reality, and having those tiny little things, that are integrated. And yeah, because I agree. I love it when I'm reading a book and if like I want to fact check something, I'm like, that writer got that correct. And that's awesome.
It's so much fun. It almost makes it feel like a choose your own adventure book because you can go down that rabbit hole.
Yes, exactly. I always love when I'm reading a book and then it inspires me to research something in the book because I'm like, this is like two books in one almost. It's like it's like the regular plot and then kind of the side plot that you can like look into the things from that era.
Totally. Well, I know you're very prolific, so it's hard to pick just one of your books or works to talk about, but I would like to go with one of your most recent publications. We're actually in this anthology together. It's the Hotel Macabre Volume 2 from Crystal Lake.
Yes.
And I loved your story, and I would love to hear you talk about it. Ask Me About My Crypt, now on sale for half price.
I'm so glad you're asking about this. I'm so excited about this anthology. It just came out earlier this year. I just am so excited, so happy to be in it with you. It's got a great table of contents. And this story is like one of what I even described it as like one of my weirder ones because it was almost like I wrote it in kind of a fever dream. It's about this character that's sort of dealing with insomnia, especially at the beginning. And I had just come out of like this bad like period of insomnia. I'm doing better now. And I hadn't really had that bad of insomnia, but then it was like a year of like high stress and all of that. And so it was like really intense. And I finally come out of it. I'm like, okay, I got to write about this. Like now that I'm out of it, I have to write about it. And basically this character is sort of an insomniac and she's middle of the night watching TV. And I was just thinking about like being a kid, if you got to stay up late, you would see those old like infomercials that were sometimes really surreal and bizarre. And especially in the middle of the night, you're like, what even is this as a kid? And so she sees an infomercial, but it's basically for this crypt that it's like, hey, you can come buy this crypt. And it's a crypt that like seems to like maybe it still has bodies in it. And she's like, what is this? And nobody believes her the next day that this is real. And so she kind of starts investigating it to find out. And very serious hijinks ensue for her, let's say that.
Yes, it was so vibey. And when you say fever dream, that's exactly what it felt like. I loved that. It felt vintage. It felt weird in the best possible way. And above all, it was very fun.
Thank you. I was very excited about that one because it was also after coming out of that period of insomnia. I'm like, I got to get something positive out of this. And so it was like, that was like a great thing to like write at the end of it. Like, okay, like this is I got this out of it, at least the story that's just so weird. And I'm glad you say fun because I think it's like fun. It's dark, but I think it's like a fun, weird story.
Well, it has the best title too. I mean, you can't go into that and not kind of know what you're getting.
Thank you.
And I always say that horror is my therapy. So I totally get taking
Mm-hmm.
experiences and writing about them because then they don't bother
Mm-hmm.
me so much.
It's true. It's true. And sometimes it almost feels like you can kind of get that personal growth out of it a little bit of like, okay, I've gone through this. Now I'm processing it through the writing. And it's like at the end of it, like I feel like I can look back over the last 5 to 10 years of my life at this point and chart where I was based on the stories I was writing. I'm like, oh, there was a period where I was writing these types of stories and now I'm writing these types. And it's so interesting to kind of go back and it's like almost like journal entries, but you're putting them out there for like the whole world to see and they have like monsters.
That is so true. I'm editing my 5th book right now, and it's about a postpartum mom, and my kids are now 2 and 4. But I
Oh,
read this, and I feel like I'm embodying that character again. And
mm-hmm.
it's crazy how much it fills me with those same emotions that I thought I had laid
Mm-hmm.
to rest years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also interesting when, like you said, when you go back and you edit a book you wrote a while ago, it's sometimes it's like, wow, I don't feel like this on a day-to-day basis anymore, but I so felt this way when I was writing it. And there are times I go back and it's also interesting when you do completely come out of something and then you read it and you're like, I don't feel this way anymore, but this was so authentic to where I was at that moment. And that is such a fascinating process. I feel like so much of writing is like self-discovery and self-awareness by the end of it, hopefully.
And almost an exorcism in some cases.
Yes, that's a really good word for it. Yes, it is definitely an exorcism.
So you've written so many different types of works. Do you have different approaches to novels versus short stories versus novellas?
Yeah, I love this question because I feel like, the answer is yes and no, right? I feel like there are certain things we do and the certain ways as writers that we approach things, but I feel like for short stories, I kind of just I let it flow a lot more. I don't necessarily plan as much. Usually I kind of like once I get a draft done, I'm like, okay, now let's go. Again, it's that exorcism at the end of like, okay, here's what I was writing about. Let's go back and sort of fine tune that now that I have an even better idea about it. So I let that be a lot more free flowing. With novels, I usually do some planning. Some novels I've done an extensive amount of planning. Some I've done a little bit less. But I like more of the idea that I know where I'm heading because it's like I feel like with a short story, you're less likely to get lost along the way because it's a short story. Whereas with a novel, you could get had to your midpoint or halfway, and you're like, oh, I totally forgot this subplot or this character, or things have shifted. And so I think for me, I like to plan it out a little bit more so I have more of a roadmap. And I almost feel like novellas for me are a little bit in between. I plan them out a little bit more like the novels. I feel like I approach, longer fiction kind of all the same way, but I'll let them kind of go a little bit, off the rails maybe to see where it'll go because again, it's not quite as long, so you can kind of keep control of it a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, and again, there's certain things like I usually write in the evening, so those things are like the same, stuff like that. I feel like is pretty standard across all of my works. And then I also do some nonfiction. I do some short nonfiction on I have a column at the lineup, and I've done other short nonfiction. So and that's fun because it's like almost a different part of your brain, like we were saying. And so often I can be like, okay, I'm going to research something for an article that maybe I'll write into a short story, or I'm already writing a short story or a novel. And I have all this research. Let's put it into an article. So that's always fun when they can kind of cross pollinate. That's always a good feeling.
What are some of your favorite nonfiction pieces you've written?
Oh, wow. I don't know. One of the things I just really love is just being able to kind of do listicles with, upcoming books from horror authors. I think that's just like my favorite thing because it's like getting the word out there about awesome books that are either have just come out or coming out, or sometimes ones that have been out for a few years. Because sometimes that's the hardest stuff to get out there is like everybody wants what's new and shiny. And I get it. Like we all do it. But I think it's nice sometimes to also be like, hey, there's this book from like 3 years ago. That's not ancient history. We can still talk about that book. And so I feel like that's like my favorite part of it is just getting the word out there about books that I love, authors that I think are doing great work. So it's just like fun. And it's always nice when it's like somebody finds the article and they're excited about it. Like, hey, I did this article. And it's like, oh, yay, I like made somebody's day happier. And that's always a good feeling because I think writing is great, but I think it can be isolating at times. And it's like, there's such like on the internet in general, everything is treated as so competitive, and even those of us who are like, we don't want that, it's still being treated that way no matter what. So that's kind of the vibes that can be around us. So it's nice, to just be able to remember we're all in this together. We're all better off if we're all doing well, because then the genre is healthier and we can all get stuff out there.
I totally agree. And that is an excellent segue into talking about Women in Horror Month, which is coming up very soon. Can you give us an overview of what that is, what it means, and why it matters?
Yes, absolutely. So Women in Horror Month was founded. It was founded a while back, probably like 10 or 15 years ago. And I wasn't there at the beginning of it. I don't even know that I was writing as much at that point. I'd been a horror filmmaker before I started writing horror fiction. I'd always written some fiction, but when I really kind of pivoted, it was right around the time that Women in Horror Month was really founded. And it was really a grassroots effort. And a lot of different people got involved, from, horror filmmaking and horror literature. And the actual sort of official website, let's say, it isn't still updated. Some of the people who originally started it have kind of moved on, but a lot of us are still keeping it going. It's March of every year. And I just think it's really important. I mean, I feel like now, as much as ever, if not more than ever, the world is extremely scary right now. It's very scary for anyone who's, quote unquote different, and I feel like women can get sidelined anywhere. And I do think some people still think of horror as a male dominated genre. I don't, but I know that perception is out there still. And it does sometimes feel like a lot of the male authors get a lot more promotion than the female authors, which is very frustrating. So for me, Women in Horror Month is about taking the opportunity to remind everyone, hey, we're here year round, and hopefully, introduce some new people into the community, or maybe connect some people who weren't connected, because so many communities online are very fragmented. There could be an author doing great work that somehow you just haven't come across, that it's just the way that the communities are. And so for me, it's just a point to come together. And again, like I said, remind everybody we're all in this together. We're all stronger when we're together, and really just, being there and promoting each other, and just having fun, and remembering that women have been in horror since the beginning. Mary Shelley with Frankenstein. So we've always been here. And just kind of having that reminder that we are still here, and we are fierce and amazing.
Yes. And this month's theme is horror and resilience.
Yes.
Right? What does that mean to you?
I was really excited about doing that, because I wanted it to be a sort of group effort. So I sent out a little Google thing for everybody who wanted to fill it out. And that was what everybody, that was the biggest votes, was horror and resilience. I'm like, that's perfect, because I was so excited about that theme, because I feel again, world is really scary right now. And I think talking about resilience and talking about being able to get through that, and so much of horror is like that. And it has always been like that. And so many female characters have been so resilient in horror. And that's so many of us who love horror, who identify as female, as women, we feel like horror really speaks to us in this regard, because it really makes us feel like this is a place where, we are shown to be resilient like we are. I mean, women are resilient. And another thing I do want to say, I kind of just touched upon it. With Women in Horror Month, we really try to include everyone. We say kind of anyone who identifies as female or femme identifying or anything. We are not going to say, this is only for a certain person or not. We have obviously everybody. And that includes, non-binary authors who are, femme presenting. If they want to be part of this, it's really important to be as diverse and inclusive as possible, because otherwise we're just doing the same thing that we're complaining about, right? So it's everybody is here. We really try to be very sure that we're being intersectional. I know that that's been an issue in the past, in general. There's always been that, people getting excluded. So I do want to make sure to say that it's very much anybody who wants to participate is invited to participate. We're not gatekeepers of saying you can't, for this reason. You want to be part of Women in Horror Month. We want everybody to be part of Women in Horror Month. And if you're an ally, then that's great too. Please, I'm telling people that are wanting to help, the guys out there, hey, you can promote us too. That's totally cool. That's, there's lots of opportunities for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, who is your favorite female resilient character in horror?
Ooh, yeah. This is probably, I'm actually wearing this shirt right now. It's We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. So let's say Mary Cat. Let's say Mary Cat Blackwood, even though like she's very scary at times. I do think that she is very resilient. So I feel like, she and Constance ultimately are highly resilient. And so let's go with them because I love them and I love Shirley Jackson.
Awesome answer. Well, you touched on this a little bit, but why do you think it's so important to highlight indie authors alongside the traditionally published authors?
I mean, I think the main thing is I don't feel like indie authors have enough promotion to begin with. I feel like it can be very hard for indie authors to get things out there and to get, major book sales and get on award lists and things like that. So I feel like it's very important to continue promoting, everybody. And it's tough. I've done both. I have a lot of books that have been indie published. I've had, a couple books that have been Big Five published. And it's tough no matter where you're at. I mean, that really is the truth. You're still always competing, even if you don't want to be competing. It's kind of like you're put in this kind of rigmarole, hamster wheel almost, even if you don't want to be. But I do think that, so many indie authors, it's so hard to get the word out there. And I feel like we need the indie authors. The indie authors are the ones that really kept us going through the points where a lot of Big Five publishers were not publishing horror. There was that period of time when we sort of lost that section in the bookstore. And that's, the indie authors are the ones that have really been the lifeblood for the genre and kept us going even through lean times. And if it comes back again, because things are cyclic, they'll be the ones to keep us going again until there's another time when, horror is big again. I'm hoping it stays big because it's always been there, but you never know. And so to me, it's like we have to be there. We have to all support each other.
That is an excellent answer. Thank you for that. And kind of going off of that, what do you wish we saw more of in the horror book world?
More women of color, more queer women, more queer folks in general, more stories from voices we haven't, usually heard from. And that can even be male voices, queer men, male writers of color, people, disabled authors, so many things, so many people that we have not heard enough stories from, even if we've heard stories about them, right? I feel like a lot of men have written women, a lot of people have written characters with disabilities and not done the proper research in the past. And I like to think that's not happening as much now. I'm sure it's still happening some, but I really want people to be able to tell their own stories. And I want us to be able to give them the support to be able to continue to tell those stories.
Well, like I said, you're very prolific, and I know you've got more cooking back there. So what is next on the horizon for you?
The big next thing right now is my second collection, The Haunted Houses She Calls Her Own, is due out in April from Raw Dog Screaming Press. So I'm very excited about that. I love, like I said at the beginning of this, I love short fiction, and it's it's like my favorite. It's where I came to horror from. So I'm really excited to have another short fiction collection. It's being released, I think, exactly 9 years to the day after my first fiction collection. It just happened to work out that way. Hopefully it will not take another 9 years. It's just sort of how it ended up breaking down. But yeah, like I'm really excited about that. Going to be doing a book tour for that. And then in the fall, I have my Great Gatsby retelling in these gilded ghostly hearts. That's due out in September from Creature. And then looking even further ahead, next March is my next novel, Everything Looks Better in Red. That is my sapphic werewolf novel from Union Square and Company. So I'm very excited. Lots of things coming out. Lots of things. Yeah. I'm saying to everybody, I'm like, you guys are going to be hearing from me a lot over the next year. So be prepared.
Can I vote for Savannah for the book tour?
Oh, Savannah. Ooh.
Most haunted city in America. We have a plaque and everything.
You have a plaque and everything. I love it so much.
Well, that's my vote. If you make it down here, I would love to come see you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I love that area. So yes, I will look into that. What bookstores do you have there?
E-Shaver Bookseller. They're downtown. They are fantastic.
Okay. Very good to know. All right.
Well, do you have any advice for aspiring authors who would like to have a career like yours?
keep writing, and keep writing the work that you want to read. And also, I would even go as far as to say, want to have your own career. I feel like every career is so unique that, like, if you try to make it too much like somebody else's, you're just going to actually make it more difficult on yourself. And, really pursue your own career and your own path, because that's going to be the thing that's probably going to make you the happiest. And just write the books that you want to read in the world. That's going to be the thing that's going to be, you're going to have the most passion about, and you're going to enjoy the most.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much. Can you tell everybody where they can keep up with you and find your work?
Absolutely. So I still use my website and my blog. That's gwendolynKiste.com. And otherwise, you can find me under Gwendolyn Kiste at Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.